welcome to The Green Pretenders,
a sustainably challenged podcast.
My name is Simon.
And my name's Sian. And this episode, we are talking about holidaying, what its impact is on the climate, and how we can get our leisure time, get our holidays in, but in a more sustainable way.
Exactly. I think we've learned a lot from this pandemic that is going on, and a lot of things might have changed, but also things are kind of going back to the old normal. And in the old normal, tourism accounted for 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So that's quite a lot. There was a study in 2018 led by Arunima Malik from the University of Sydney. And for the first time in this study, they actually looked at the complete impact of tourism. So that includes travel by air, rail and road, consumption of goods and services, so food, accommodation, and toiletries and things that are being used, and obviously services as well.
That's so interesting because it's easy to think about travel as being quite literally just the mode of transport, isn't it? A toss-up between, I'll take a train instead of a plane because that would be sensible, but then maybe everything goes out the window once you're at the destination, and like all the mini toiletries and all of the other stuff that goes with holidaying that we forget are very much a part of the overall impact of that activity.
When we talk about emissions, we can also look about the biggest polluters, and the current list that I'm now going to give is including domestic and international travel. So countries like the US, for example, more people travel within the US because it's also a big ass country. But for example, in the UK, it's kind of half and half. Like half the tourism is actually within the UK, and then half is international. And then there are other countries like Canada, for example. The majority is international travel, and very little is actually in-a-country travel.
So it's more just a point of interest that it's weighted differently in different countries, internationally and domestic.
Yes.
But overall, we're 10th, did you say?
Yes, the UK is number 10. The US is number 1.
And that's interesting because the US have predominantly domestic travel, but they're top of the list for environmental impact of their tourist activities. Because I was reading earlier that even though we're quick to demonise flying as, the number one carbon enemy, if you're a true environmentalist, you should never fly again. But I read that a like-for-like distance, flying can be better. So, for example, if you're going to drive from the south coast of England up to Edinburgh in a car on your own, you're creating more of an environmental impact than if you get on a flight from like Bournemouth to Edinburgh, as long as it's, a relatively full flight. I think it was 80% and up. So in some cases, flying is a lesser evil. So maybe the Americans, even though they're travelling domestically, maybe they're driving all over the place, they love their road trips, and that is worse than if they were making the equivalent flight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also America's consumption is just different from the UK. So, they might be stopping at every fast food restaurant. I mean, this is also a stereotype. We're being horrible here, but this all accounts for the greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah. It's a stereotype, but for a reason. I remember my mum and stepdad and my brother did a little trip in America, like a road trip vibe, and I remember them saying that the size of portions wherever you go to eat out was something else. I think my mum said she had a burrito that was literally the size of her thigh, and my brother had a pizza that was, the size of a fucking, I don't know what's a big round thing?
Tractor wheel.
Yeah, the size of a tractor wheel. So yeah, I think it is true just by nature that they produce and consume quite a lot more than we do.
Getting more like America every day.
Yes. So one question I have about this. So obviously if we're number 10, we're not doing great on the global stage of how much we're doing damage with our tourism activities. But one thing that I think some people might say is that tourism for some places is essential to keep their economy going. So if we as Brits say, okay, we need to do better, we don't want to be number 10, we want to be number 50, and we're going to slash our international travel, people would say that leaves certain countries in quite a tricky position because they rely on us visiting to kind of keep a lot of people in jobs and stuff. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. So, well, I think it really depends on the choices we make. The choice of transportation, also the choice of accommodation, the choice of what we are consuming. I think there are a lot of good choices to be made. So we're not saying, and this study is not saying, let's scrap tourism, everyone stay where the fuck they are, no one's allowed to travel, because we just had that and it feels horrible. But what we're saying is, okay, so I want to go on a holiday. How am I going to get there? Where am I going to stay? Is that hotel eco-friendly? Like, do they have any certifications? Am I going to use Airbnb and, cook my own food, for example? And then also, maybe we need to cut down on things like souvenirs and taking things from the natural world, for example, which you have mentioned before, which we shouldn't do, like seashells and things like that. So, I think there are variations of how sustainable a holiday can be.
It's that thing that's happening everywhere, that if we want to improve things on an environmental level, there will be damage done elsewhere. So the idea of cutting down on fast fashion does impact people's livelihoods, because there are people who sadly work for a very low wage in factories to make these kind of fast fashion clothes, but it's still a job and they still need that money. Cancelling it all doesn't work. So I guess that's a similar thing here, right? As you say, it's about how you travel, not if you travel.
Yeah, exactly. And then also, if we want to build a sustainable economy, then there will be changes. And some people might lose their job in the tourism industry, but if the government does it in a good, sustainable way, there might be other jobs, and people adapt. People will find new ways of, making money. And yeah,
I guess it's patronizing to say that they need us. They rely on us visitors to go and buy their conch shell paperweight. What would they do if we weren't buying that conch shell paperweight? It's like, that's patronizing. Of course they'll find something else, and something that they want to be doing, and something that serves their own lives better.
Yes. And I almost think it's a bit of a colonial thing as well. It's, we from the West, with our money, we basically fund these poor countries because we're so good and so interested in their culture. It's a bit weird when you think about it.
It is.
So tourism has an impact on climate change. It was fact number 1. And then fact number 2 is that climate change has an impact on tourism. So, for example, if we look at ski resorts, they rely on regular snow. But if there's no snow in the winter, they're in a bit of a pickle.
They are.
Same with countries or cities that are very close to sea level, like the Netherlands or Venice, for example, or Dubrovnik in Croatia. They're actually under threat by rising sea levels. And then we hear tragic things about the Great Barrier Reef, or, for example, Mauritius. Our heart really goes out to Mauritius and the oil spill that just happened there. So, these places are very fragile often, but they're also tourist hotspots. And, one has an impact on the other.
Yeah.
Okay, that was all very doom and gloom, but there are alternatives, Sian, aren't there?
There are alternatives, yes. So if you were following us on social media, then you will know that I recently did a little walk and camp around the Isle of Wight, which is a small island just off of the coast of England, the south coast. We decided to do that because of the limitations that the pandemic has put about, really. So we thought camping is totally safe. You're very distanced from everyone. You're in the great outdoors. We'll be walking the whole way around. But obviously a major plus point and silver lining was the idea that it's such a sustainable way to travel.
Yay.
So a little rundown of what we did. We walked roughly 70 miles over 5 days, five and a half days. And we basically didn't have any emissions, really. We got the ferry from Portsmouth over to the island, and I could have swam. Simon, I should have swam.
You should have really swam. Shame on you.
Yeah. I wonder if there could have been a different way. I mean, chartering a small sailboat, I think probably would have been our only other option. And maybe we should have. But we got the ferry, and we had a nice beer with the nice views and the sea breeze on the ferry. But the rest of it, we just walked. We arrived, we set up camp, and then we had a different campsite per night, and we did the coastal path around the island. And We were lucky with the weather. It was quite rainy at points, because I know that the main thing about camping is that the weather can really put a downer on it, but we were lucky with that. So overall, it was a great success.
One question, could you just camp anywhere? Like, can you free camp on the Isle of Wight?
We didn't do any wild camping, no, and I'm yet to do that at all. Have you ever?
No, I've never done that. I'd be so scared that someone with a rifle's gonna arrive at my...
So my partner Dave has experience with wild camping. He's got a bivy bag and he's got a hammock that he can set up in between trees. I think basically a rule of thumb is if you find a spot that's off the beaten track, then you're kind of fine. But I do know that my friends who've done it have had some sleepless nights, sort of just feeling worried. Like, what if someone does walk past and go, "Oi, what on earth are you doing here?" So I think you have to be quite confident with it and just say, "Que sera, sera. If I get moved on, fine."
Yeah.
But we didn't do that on the Isle of Wight, no. We did have one campsite that was the closest you'd get to wild camping with some structure. It was like compostable toilets, solar powered showers. There were no like facilities on site essentially other than what nature can provide. So that was great.
Wow, sounds like a dream.
It was so cool, and that one especially, we were lucky with the weather, because I will say a solar powered shower sounds all well and lovely for the world, and I was very proud to be taking that shower, but boy was it cold. Sunshine was crazy all day, so we were like, obviously this shower's going to have warmed right up, but something went a bit awry and it was like standing in an ice bucket. So if it had been rainy and cold and then a freezing cold shower, that would have been really depressing. But luckily, it was all wonderful. If anything, the cold shower was a nice relief. So yeah, it was a great success. The trickiest thing we found was food on the go, because you're so limited by the shops that you pass by and how much you can carry in your pack. You know, we were carrying sort of, I think mine was around 16 kilograms. Dave's was probably more like 20. So we couldn't be too fussy about what we bought. We just kind of had to take what we got. But wonderful friends of the podcast, Shaz and Gigi, who do some wild camping, they dehydrate all their meals in advance. And it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
They dehydrate their meals?
Yeah. So they've got a dehydration machine at home. And I hope they don't mind me telling the world about this. Well, not the world. The world. Everyone's listening to us. They have a dehydration thing and they'll cook up like a veggie chili, for example. You put it in this machine and it sucks all of the moisture out of the food. And then when you're camping, it's really lightweight, takes up no space. Then you just add the water back in and it expands like some sci-fi movie back into a veggie chili.
Oh my God, this sounds insane. That's like a true life hack.
Isn't it? It's mental. So completely sustainable because you've got all the meals you need prepared ahead of time. It's super lightweight. The only thing I asked about was the electricity and the power that the dehydrating thing itself uses. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it's a very slow, low temperature process apparently. So it sounds like it's quite low impact. That's level 11 Eco Warrior.
That's so cool.
So level 11 is wild camping, carrying everything on your back with your dehydrated meals, and that is incredible levels of sustainable travel. I think I'm more of a level 7, maybe. I do like to stay somewhere that has facilities, and the food element I'm not so organised with. I think what we would espouse today is that you don't even need to be a level 7. You don't even need to camp. You don't even need to get in a tent, honey. You can travel how you like. But the bottom line is, if you take a lovely seaside break to Hastings, for example, or Brighton, or if you go and wander around historical Bath, or nip up to Glasgow, which is a brilliant city, all of those things.
Even Paris, is you get on the Eurostar, that's fine. But like, yeah, flying to Spain or Mallorca for a weekend, you know, these are crazy things that we've done.
Yeah.
We're not proud of them.
Oh no. Well, I'm not proud and I don't regret them. Is it okay to have both those things?
Yeah. Because it's a journey and we're learning, and we shouldn't regret. You should never regret anything because, you know, that doesn't help you in the present.
It's done, isn't it? It's already done.
It's already done. But we can learn.
Don't regret what you have done. Just empower yourself to change what you will do.
Exactly.
Let's talk about some hotspots in the UK where people might think about going. So, for example, I reckon if what you want is like beautiful nature and trees and tranquility, and you haven't been ever to the Lake District, then you must go. Because I feel like people go to countries like Croatia, have beautiful big lakes and stuff, don't they?
Yeah, yeah.
And the Lake District, the first time I went, I genuinely thought I was in another country. I didn't even think that such beauty and such expansive vistas could exist on this little island. It's so wonderful. So please, if you haven't been to the Lake District as someone who lives here, make that your next trip.
Yeah, I've never been and I really want to go.
The kind of 1 to 11 scale of eco-warrior travelling, you can do it any place along that scale. You could wild camp in the Lake District, but you could also get a beautiful little cabin or a beautiful holiday home or stay in a hotel if you want to. But it's so beautiful. Let's go, Simon. We can do paddle boarding and swimming and cycling and it's so nice.
It'd be amazing. It reminds me of the trip we took to Snowdonia like 2 years ago.
Yes.
We rented a car and there were 5 or even 6 of us. So yes, we drove, but because there was 6 of us, it was way more sustainable because we shared the emissions. So per capita, it was lower impact. And then we stayed in this beautiful little hostel, but it was more like a family-run business. And we had a room there. And we went hiking and it was great. It was such a good experience. And you don't have to fly to Slovenia for that. You can do it in Wales.
Yeah, I know these things aren't for everyone. If you don't like getting a bit dirty outdoors and if you feel like you couldn't cope with being cold and things like that. But you don't actually know until you've tried, because you get so much joy out of a trip like that I think sometimes it overrides any level of discomfort that you might be worried about feeling. And you kind of have to try to know.
Yeah. And because you mentioned Hastings and Brighton, so these are 2 actually day trips that I've done this summer, and it's so lovely. So basically, a friend of mine had an Airbnb in Hastings, and I know Airbnb can be a little bit controversial because of rents and stuff like that, but I still think it's such a brilliant way to sort out accommodation, because it's kind of somewhere in between a hotel and having your own space in your own holiday home. And you usually have a kitchen, so you can cook, so you don't have to eat out, so it's usually a little bit cheaper as well. But Hastings is so lovely, and I didn't have it on my radar at all, but it's actually such a lovely little seaside town. Like, the old town was really nice, and I moved to this country 6 years ago, but I've actually seen so little of it. So this was a perfect opportunity for me to explore more of the UK. And I'm sure a lot of people who were born here, how much holiday do you get a year? So you don't really get to explore the country that much. And I think it's such a wonderful opportunity to do that.
Definitely. And the psychology of it is that those few days that people do get off a year, they want to go explore, and in people's minds exploring means going abroad. And I think it's amazing how many people in this country you meet that will be ticking off capital cities across Europe, for example, like, last year we went to Madrid, next year we're going to Rome, the year after, or maybe next month we're going here, there and everywhere. And you could say, have you been to Liverpool? Have you been to Manchester? Have you been to Birmingham, Newcastle, Leeds, Glasgow, Edinburgh? There are so many awesome cities that offer so much of what you might think you need to go abroad for. And I feel like we should all challenge ourselves. Next time someone suggests a city break, make sure it's a UK city. Liverpool is so cool.
Liverpool is so cool, and so is Manchester. The 2 cities I have been to, and I would definitely go back as well, because there's so much more to explore. Like, even if you spend a weekend there, I've been to Liverpool twice. The second time was completely different from the first time. And I think maybe a lot of people who did grow up in the UK, they kind of associate that with boring family holidays, when they were teenager. And now as adults, and I think most of our listeners are adults, explore it with your friends. Like, going out in a different city is a whole different experience, you know. And like, travel, if you're from the south of England, travel more to the north and explore like the nightlife there and how people are living. And it gives us, I mean, this is all very lovey-dovey, but I do think it gives us more of an understanding of how people live, you know, what their reality and day-to-day life feels like. And we live in a very divided country, and you know, this is maybe a way of sort of mending a few of those wounds that have been created.
And let's just recap the travel element of that, because let's assume that we can convince everyone to do this and take those city breaks with their friends within the UK. If you are going to drive, you need to do a car share for it to be the better choice. Don't think, oh, I'll drive because that's better than getting a plane if you're going from London to Edinburgh, for example. If you're on your own in that car, you should get the plane.
Also, traveling on a train in a group can be really fun, and you should really explore your options. Like, often there are group tickets. I once got a group ticket to Brighton on Thameslink, and I think it was a Sunday, but it was with my family. We were 4 people. It cost us 20 quid for 4 people. And that way we would also put more money into the infrastructure, and then ideally over time trains would get cheaper as well. But there's also a lot of political stuff that needs to happen for that. But if you can take a train, it's really fun to take a train in the group.
And people might hate you because you'll be chatting and having fun and maybe having some tinnies on the train, but haters gonna hate.
Haters gonna hate. I was gonna say the same thing.
I've just found this sentence which sums up the differences. So assuming that it's a like-for-like distance, if your travel is fully booked, a diesel bus comes out on top, followed by a high-speed train, then a car with at least 3 people in it, and then a medium aircraft. So the old plane is at the bottom of the list, but keep in mind that it very much depends on how many people are in that mode of transport, as a summary.
Also, I know that coaches are uncomfortable, but there's such an economical way of getting around. I've taken many buses, and I mean, it's kind of funny how uncomfortable they are. I went up to Edinburgh, which is a long journey, but I had my audiobooks, and the way back I was actually traveling with a friend of ours, so, you know, it can be fun.
For sure. I think a bit of sacrifice of personal comfort is an ongoing theme of this podcast and of the sustainability movement, isn't it? And it's like, I used to do the overnight megabus from London to the northeast. I mean, sleep was not a thing on that overnight megabus, I can tell you. And usually it was noisy and smelly and weird, but the stories that you get out of it, I mean, it's worth it. It's so worth it. And what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
And you always have a good story to tell.
Absolutely. So, in summary, we would like to inspire each other to explore the UK in the most sustainable way possible.
Exactly. And for our international listeners, because there are a few, explore your local area, explore your country. And it doesn't even, you know, like, we're on an island, obviously, but for example, in Austria, it's probably better to travel to Slovakia if you're in the east. Sorry, I'm assuming that people are in Vienna always, because that's where I'm from, sort of in that area. But if you're going to Slovakia, that is closer than going to the west of Austria, for example. So explore your local area and see, you know, if you live close to the border, well, then you can even go to a different country, stay local, travel sustainable, and make informed choices.
Yeah, and I would like to apologise actually to international listeners, because I reckon a lot of what's come out of my mouth this episode has been very UK centric, almost exclusively.
But they love it. They love it. And also, what counts for the UK counts for other countries as well.
Yeah. Insert city name here.
All right, Shan, what is your eco poop for this episode?
So our eco poops are things that grind our gears or that we've been slipping up on. And my eco poop is the price of rail travel, linked to this episode, because it just is so frustrating that people aren't incentivized at all by this bull crap government and stupid Richard Branson and the way that they're all in cahoots and all bollocks. no one is incentivized to take public transport because it's also bloody expensive, and that really does my nut. So hashtag renationalise the railways, hashtag Jeremy Corbyn, hashtag something else.
Hashtag solidarity. Solidarity's become kind of a big thing for me now because we just lack it so much. There's no sense of having solidarity with other people. I know we're being very political here, but fuck it. I agree 100%.
What's yours?
My eco poop is a very sad one. It is, I mentioned it before, the oil spill on the coast of Mauritius. I think it's just shambolic. Like, this should not be happening. This has happened so much. It destroys people's lives. It destroys natural beauty. And if it is too bloody dangerous to transport oil across the globe, then we shouldn't do it. Keep it in the ground. There are alternatives. You know, it's just because we're so reliant on oil that these people lose their livelihoods, all these animals are suffering. It's just a bloody mess.
What can we do in response to it?
You can donate if you want to. You can follow Greta Thunberg. She has all the info for you where to send money if you want to. So go on Greta Thunberg's Instagram because she did talk about it.
Amazing. I will do that. But in happier times, what are our eco whoops?
Whoop whoop. So, my eco whoop this week, I want to turn my room into an urban jungle. I'm obsessed with plants, and don't buy plants if you know you're going to kill them. But instead, your mission should be to get better at keeping plants alive and thriving. I'm lucky, I'm quite good with plants, and I love them, and they love me back, and it's all very nice. And there are actually houseplants that purify air. For example, the snake plant is a super eco-whoop because it actually produces oxygen also at night. A lot of plants don't, so actually you need to be careful which plants you have in your bedroom. But the snake plant is great. It produces oxygen at night. It's relatively low maintenance.
And it's got a pretty sexy name there as well, hasn't it? The snake plant.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing this urban jungle grow and hopefully visiting it and seeing loads of pictures of you and your jungle habitat.
Yeah. What's your eco whoop?
My eco whoop is the joy of second-hand buying and selling. I just want to give it a shout out this week because I've been sorting through a lot of my old possessions, and I'm just always blown away by it because you realise that literally anything you could possibly want, you will be able to get it second-hand. Like, I don't think there's a single thing that you could need that some weirdo isn't selling on eBay.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I just think there are some things that I wouldn't think to first check on Depop or on eBay, but actually Depop, the app, I think is better known for fashion, but people are selling all sorts on there. They're selling homeware, electricals, you name it, and it's just a win-win-win-win because you're winning, you're saving money, the world is winning because you've bought something that was already in existence. We're not perpetuating the idea of create, consume. And that person that you've just bought it off is winning because they're like, oh yay, I've got £5 in my pocket to go and buy myself some sweets.
Yes, secondhand is great. That is the end of this episode.
Where can people chat to us?
People can chat us on social media at Green Pretenders.
Or you can become our pen pal and send us a little email if you have any specific comments or feedback. thegreenpretenders@gmail.com.
And if you have a bit of time, leave us a review on iTunes or comment on one of our YouTube videos.
And always remember, the pod is always greener.